Hey Maria, this is on back with Women of the Bible, and this is Razboh. Her character, Saul concubine, Razor was the mother of Armani. Though a woman with few rights and little power, she displayed great courage and loyalty after the death of her sons. Her sorrow that her only son were executed and their bodies dishonored because of their father's crime. Her joy that the bodies of her sons were finally given an honorable burial. Her story. One day, a rabbi stood on a hill overlooking a certain city. The rabbi watched in horror as a band of Caucasians on horseback suddenly attacks the town, killing innocent men, women, and children. Some of the slaughter were his own disciples. Looking up to heaven, the rabbi exclaimed, "Oh, if only I were God." An astonished student, standing nearby, asked, "But master, if you were God, what would you do differently?" The rabbi replied, "If I were God, I would do nothing differently. If I were God, I would understand." One day, a woman named Razboh was standing on a hill in Israel, watching the execution of 7 men. Her grief was sharp, but among the dead were her own 2 sons, executed for their father's crime. Their bodies were left to rot on the hillside, despite a law requiring burial by sunset. Perhaps, like the rabbi, Razor wished she were God, even for a moment. Maybe then she would understand the why of what she had just witnessed. It is not hard to imagine Rita suffering, to watch as her body convulsed in sorrows, to see her pound a fist against her breast, to beat away the grief. When will she turn away from the gruesome spectacle, we wonder, but instead of fleeing the scene of her sorrows, she faced it. Drawn close to bloody bodies she once had cradled in her arms, then she spreads sackcloth on a rock and sits down, refusing to move except to the beat of birds of prey by day and jackals by night. Her vigil will last for several months, from mid-April to early October. Razboh will not bury her grief as long as the bodies of her sons remain unburied. Joshua had promised to live in peace with the there's some crazy names, the knights, but Saul had murdered many of them during the realm, intended to humiliate them. As a result of Saul's oath breaking, Israel suffered a fateful 3 years running. In retribution, the knights had asked David for 7 of Saul's male offspring. David surrendered Saul's 2 sons by Razboh and 5 grandsons by Saul's daughter Merab. Blood was split for blood. Scripture doesn't say whether Razboh's sons shared their father's guilt, but like all mothers whose children had perished by violence, those in Bosnia, Kosovo, Rwanda, our own inner cities, and even our suburbs, Razboh must have stood the terrible link between sin and death. One person's sin is a cancer that spreads. By refusing to hide her grief, by living out her anguish in public, Razboh gave meaning to her son's death, making the entire nation face the evil of what had happened. Finally, the rain came. Finally, the king's heart was touched, heartening of Razboh's loyalty and courage. David ordered the remains of the executed to be buried. He even ordered Saul, his son Jonathan's bones to be reclaimed and buried. Scripture doesn't say that God ordered David to hand the men over to the knights in the first place, or even that the famine ended when they were executed. Instead, as Virginia Stems Owen points out in her books, Daughter of Eve, the Bible indicates that God answered prayers on behalf of the land after the dead were given a decent burial. David, acting in honor of the dead, may have signaled an end to Israel's divisions. Finally, the land could be healed and the Israelites could reunite under David's leadership. Razboh made the people look at the cost of sin. Like many women in ancient cultures, she had few rights and little power, but her persistent courage gave meaning to her son's death and helped a nation deal with sin of its leader. Her story is tragic, her response memorable. Perhaps because of her, other mothers in Israel were spared a similar grief at least for a time. And I'll be back with another woman of